Tragedy struck, and the boss of a major company ended up dead. The sad event was facilitated by the head of the huge syndicate and the leader of the entire mafia, Mr. Brown, whom everyone called the chairman. The boss's two agents and chief assistants, John and Linda, did not have time to arrive to help their boss and stood silently over the body. Linda's mind was filled with fond memories and moments of working together undercover, and she was unable to accept the loss. A year passed, but time does not heal, and the girl could not move on from what had happened, practically not communicating with anyone, when suddenly one day her only friend and partner, John, came to see her. The young man said that he did not waste time and found one very interesting fact. The young man gave his friend a photo in which there was a large, beautiful building among many trees against the backdrop of a mountain landscape. As it turned out, it was a closed educational institution for the children of the elite from all over the world. John saw the surprise in Linda's eyes and said it was just school. The complex of stylish buildings with platforms and a fence was really impressive, and in no way created the impression of an educational complex. The girl looked at her partner in bewilderment and asked to explain what this photo had to do with the death of her beloved boss. A friend reminded her of an old portrait kept in the company archives, in which their worst enemy, Mr. Brown, was captured in a narrow family circle, and in the background there stood an unknown young man. John said that he had found information that the godfather of the mafia has a son who is carefully hidden from everyone, and he studies at this particular school. A plan of revenge matured in Linda's head in 1 second. She decided that she would find Brown Jr. and avenge her loss. The preparations were short-lived, and 3 days later, a new student appeared at the elite school. There were many students, including male ones. The girl realized that it would not be easy to find a person about whom there was no information or photographs, and she was even a little confused. Linda was so lost in her thoughts that while walking along the school alley, she managed to push 2 students who were looking at their new classmate. The main character was so busy with her problems that she didn't even bother to apologize, which greatly offended the girls. The teacher led Linda into a large classroom with almost no empty seats. The girl stood silently at the blackboard and looked at her new acquaintances until the teacher asked her to introduce herself and choose a desk. Having said her name, the newly born student went to an empty seat. Fortunately, the table was at the very back of the class, and Linda could easily observe everything that was happening in the office. The silence was interrupted by the loud speech of the blonde, who suddenly approached the girl, a classmate, and this was the same victim who Linda accidentally pushed on the street, began to be loudly indignant. She really wanted to know how a new student could get into her class in the middle of the school year. The girl with blonde, luxurious hair was named Barbara, and she was extremely surprised, because this is an elite school. Children from unknown places do not study here. The young offspring of parents of only 4 ranks could enter the closed educational institution. The first rank includes the highest-ranking families, including the leaders of the country, the largest corporations, organizations, companies, and syndicates. The second rank consisted of those who were not much lower in class. That is, the owners of slightly less significant but quite influential institutions, while the third level included people who were first assistants and deputies of superiors. Barbara carefully tried to figure out where to take her impudent classmate and where she came from. It dawned on the blonde that this girl was nothing at all and was nothing at all. She immediately drew and hung a label with the number 4 on the new student's forehead. The arrogant girl calmed down and left the class with her friend. It was lunchtime. Students from other classes were already sitting in the school cafeteria. Linda happily took a tray of food and sat away from the others. The silence did not last long here either. The already hated blonde classmate passing by dumped her food on the girl's tray. The main character was a little taken aback by such impudence, especially since she had already worked up an appetite, and she was looking forward to moments of bliss since there was a delicious piece of steak for lunch. The girl even managed to rejoice because there were now 2 delicious meat dishes on the tray. Barbara's friend, who, as it turned out, also really loved meat, suddenly became indignant and wanted to take a second portion, but was rebuffed. The next person in the showdown was the culprit of the ruined lunch. An enraged Linda grabbed her classmate by the blouse. The blonde didn't even have time to understand how she found herself lying on the floor of the dining room. Everything happened very quickly. The hungry new student couldn't calm down, and after knocking down her opponent, she grabbed a fork, preparing to stab her straight in the face. Lying on her back, Barbara saw a metal fork just a centimeter from her eye and was completely scared. She realized that she could go blind forever. At this time, some schoolchildren stopped eating and watched with interest the ongoing fight. Among them was a classmate of the girls. Linda loomed over her tormentor and tried to calm down, remembering why she was there. The girl had enough strength to pull herself together and let go of the blonde. She left the dining room hungry, leaving more than one classmate in fear. The main character left school, mentally scolding herself for her unrestrained behavior, which made her very upset. Suddenly, a tall, handsome young man appeared on the girl's path, having previously observed what was happening in the dining room. He was delighted with her behavior, because previously no one could put the arrogant Barbara in her place. The young people started talking. The young man introduced himself and said that they would study in the same class. Roy, that was the handsome guy's name, was very polite and asked for his new friend's phone number. Passing high school students quietly discussed what had happened, and of course, immediately drew attention to the talking couple. The girls especially began to fuss, because many dreamed of meeting this blonde. Linda did not resist for long, and recorded her data on the young man's smartphone. She was carried away, and did not pay attention to the surprised and envious glances of her competitors. The young man boldly looked at the girl. He really liked her, and he did not know how to continue the acquaintance. The young man suggested going for a snack, since lunch was ruined, or just taking a walk and showing the school and the surrounding area. The main character did not expect such a quick acquaintance. She decided to take a break and just run away, especially since it was time to get in touch and discuss the results of the first day with her partner. Linda hid in a secluded, quiet corner of the building and dialed John's number, who answered immediately. All this time, he was very worried and waiting for news. The partner told about the first day, concealing the conflict in the dining room, and asked to find out more information about her new acquaintance. The girl's friend was glad to receive the feedback and immediately began looking for data. But John's answer was shocking, since there was absolutely nothing in the database about Linda's classmate. The partner advised the friend to get to know the girls in the class better in order to collect more information and to gain the trust of the new acquaintance, inviting him to take a walk and eat. Linda decided to take advantage of the recommendations, and having found Roy near the school, asked to show him around. On the way, classmates went to a cafe and ordered lunch, but the spiciness and quality of the prepared dishes were not at the highest level, and they did not manage to eat tasty food. The weather was excellent, and the young people walked almost until the evening. After saying goodbye to Roy, Linda called a friend, listened to new advice on how to interest her friend, and went to school with the idea of searching for a new girlfriend. Going around the corner, the girl again ran into her fair-haired classmate and was about to leave, but heard that she was crying and swearing with an unfamiliar guy. Barbara asked the young man, calling him Lucas, to give her his phone or delete the photographs, compromising her from it himself. Linda came closer, saw the girl's tears, and with a sharp, strong movement of her hand, snatched the smartphone from the offender. The main character calmly handed the gadget to the blonde and told her to remove everything unnecessary herself. Lucas was furious. He clenched his fists and attacked the intercessor without even looking that it was just a girl in front of him. Linda easily repelled the attack, putting the guy on both shoulder blades. The surprised schoolchildren and Barbara looked at the young man lying on the path and did not understand how such a strong young man could end up on the ground. Having returned the phone to the offender, the like-minded women ran away holding hands. The rumor about the beaten Lucas and the brave new student began to spread throughout the school. The guy who witnessed the conflict told everyone he met about it, including his high school friend Alex, who refused to believe what had happened. Hiding, the classmates sat on the steps of the school and discussed the situation, apologizing to each other for everything that happened to them in this short time. Barbara turned out to be a good girl. She studied at school from the first grade and told her new friend a lot, including about Roy. The blonde said that the young man appeared suddenly in his senior year. No one knew who he and his parents were, but he studied well and behaved very intelligently and calmly. In the class, there was the son of an influential leader who did not like Roy, and Jacques began to mock the newcomer, constantly setting him up, humiliating him, mocking him, to which he practically did not react. One day, after another conflict, the offender suddenly disappeared completely, and no one could explain what happened. The girls got talking and didn't notice Roy, who came closer and sat down next to him on the stairs. When he heard the story about himself, he laughed and said that he definitely didn't kill his enemy. Thus, having made peace with Barbara and gained a friend, Linda took the young man by the hand and led him outside. The young people continued to communicate without prying eyes and decided to go for a walk again after school. The conversation was interesting. Both liked their attitude towards each other, but they had to go to class. Under the envious glances of the handsome man's fans, the couple went to study. The thought of the next meeting made both of them happy. After class, Roy invited the girl to his home, promising to cook a delicious dinner. The young man's house was clean and tidy. It turned out that he lived alone, and this surprised Linda. The girl asked for a drink. Fortunately, there was juice in the refrigerator, and while the owner was preparing food, she went to study the situation. The main character caught her eye on a computer, and all the information on it was instantly transferred to a flash drive. Then the guest's gaze fell on a shelf with a thick, dusty photo album. Curiosity got the better of her, and Linda decided to look at the pictures. All the photographs were the same. They showed little Roy with a sad look. He was all alone. There were no family cards. The girl was very surprised by the discovery. She could not understand why the child was everywhere alone and so sad. The young man called his guest into the kitchen. A fragrant dish was cooking on the stove. It was already ready, and Linda felt hungry. A careless movement, and the boiling soup tipped over on Roy. His stomach was especially damaged, although clothing was able to slightly reduce the burns. The heroine immediately dragged the victim into a bath of cold water and applied pieces of ice to the injury site. The young man's pumped-up naked torso and powerful biceps confused the girl a little. After administering first aid, Linda quickly and professionally applied a bandage to the abdominal area. Then the girl helped him get dressed so as not to hurt the wounds. Roy steadfastly tried to endure all the actions of his new acquaintance, wondering how she did everything so skillfully and quickly, and how she knew everything. The young man tried to find out about the reason for professionalism, but in response he received a bunch of questions about who he was, why he was alone, and where his family was. The evening of questions and answers was not a success. The young people became isolated and exchanged general phrases. The dinner was irrevocably ruined. Roy understood that the girl was hiding something, and Linda drank a glass of juice and began to get ready to go home. The young people were sad and upset. Suddenly, the phone rang. The girl retired to the bathroom and was frightened to see that her partner was calling. Although the connection was supposed to be one way, and not in vain, screams and moans were heard on the phone. Having said an urgent goodbye, Linda practically ran out of the young man's house. The girl ran to a safe house where her friend was supposed to be and did not understand what could have happened. What he saw upon arrival at the place surpassed all the most nightmarish horrors. John, covered in blood, unconscious, sat in his work chair with a bottle of wine lying next to him. Having lost her vigilance, the girl ran to her friend and suddenly felt that there was someone behind her. At the last second, Linda pulled herself together and was able to repel the attacker's blow with a bat in her hand. This saved her from death, since the attacker did not expect such a quick reaction. The girl's blow turned out to be so powerful that the stranger lost his balance and fell, the bat flying off to the side. The next moment, the attacker had a knife in his hands, and the main character was unable to completely dodge the blade. A tangential blow went through the left hand. While the girl grabbed the wound, the man disappeared, taking advantage of the hitch. Linda was able to approach her friend, examine him, and provide assistance, reassuring that he was alive and his wounds were not very serious. The girl helped her partner get to the hospital, where experienced doctors stitched up the wounds and installed an IV to replenish blood loss. John, who regained consciousness, said that the unknown attacker suddenly attacked, then climbed into the laptop database and downloaded information. The girl remembered her flash drive and handed it over to her partner for further work when she recovered. The friend began to make fun of his colleague about her acquaintance and going to visit a new acquaintance, to which he immediately received a blow, from which even fresh wounds and stitches could not save him, since Linda was very angry. Leaving her partner in the room, the girl went to look for a quiet place to be alone. The hospital had a large platform on the roof, probably for a helicopter, where Linda went up to calmly think about what had happened. In difficult moments, the main character often remembered her boss. She was like a mother and best friend with whom she could always discuss any issues and get support. Linda really missed this now. The girl was not alone on the playground. There was a young man from a parallel class, about whom all the girls whispered during breaks. I think his name was Alex, and he really made it difficult for Linda to gather her thoughts. The main character was about to leave, but saw Barbara's recent offender, who, after an unsuccessful fight with Linda, was in this hospital and was now walking towards her, full of desire to repay the girl for his defeat. Probably a second skirmish would have taken place, but then Alex, who had already heard from a friend about this incomprehensible, extraordinary girl, intervened. He distracted Linda's attention and took her aside to talk. The difficult first day of school passed, and now it was morning again, which meant I had to go to school for classes. The stormy night took its toll, and Linda fell asleep right in class, lying down on her desk. During recess, the girl was woken up by a loud voice. With indignation, she opened her eyes and saw a smiling Roy, whom she had completely forgotten about. A new acquaintance kindly asked why she was sleeping in the morning and saw a taped wound on the girl's arm. The young man was very upset and began to ask what happened and who offended Linda. The girl was in shock. She couldn't understand why she had to tell her new acquaintance something. Roy brought his classmate to the infirmary and continued questioning. Suddenly, Linda's phone, lying on the table, rang loudly in the room. The young people raced towards the screaming gadget, pushing each other away. The young man was faster, and a second later the smartphone was already in his hand. The girl desperately tried to take away her equipment. A small scuffle ensued, and only the main character found herself sitting on top of her classmate when Alex came into the medical room to get a pill for his head. Linda took advantage of the delay, and grabbing the phone, ran away from the medical room, leaving the guys alone. The girl received a call from her new friend, who was bored without long-term communication. The classmates met in the office and began discussing plans for the evening. The rich blonde really wanted to go shopping, but it wouldn't be interesting for her alone, so she tried to attract a new student to shopping who desperately tried to refuse. Barbara went looking for people who wanted to go shopping with her, but all her former friends turned away or left when she appeared, which upset the girl extremely. The desperate blonde went into the dining room and sat down at the table next to Linda, who was quietly dining, her appetite ruined. The rich girl said that her father has big problems in the company, and the clash between the girls that happened the day before upset her even more, that no one supports or approaches her, so she is in shock and does not know what to do. The main character, feeling guilty for everything that happened at the first meeting, had to agree to go to the store, which made the blonde very happy, and after class the girls went to the supermarket. Approaching a huge building with many boutiques, Linda prepared herself for the worst time of her life. The girl's doubts were justified. She was tired of shopping and couldn't wait for the torture to end, while Barbara was happy and tried on more and more new outfits. The blonde, seeing her friend's gloomy face, picked out a fashionable dress and chic shoes for her, which transformed the girl in an instant. The price of the purchases was fabulous, but Barbara decided to give a gift to her new friend by paying for her and her outfits, which greatly surprised Linda. The girls decided to celebrate their purchases and went to a cafe to have a snack, discussing new things. The blonde was very pleased with the shopping trip and tried to get her friend to talk to find out who she really is and who her parents are. What rank she belongs to if she behaves so boldly and decisively at school that she was not even afraid to beat Lucas, who was in the highest ranks, given his father's status. Linda confessed to her classmate that she managed to hush up the conflict with the unexpected support of Alex, which greatly surprised her. The girl's classmate was of the highest rank, handsome, smart, and very tactful. Satisfied friends left the cafe and prepared to go home, each thinking about their own. A personal driver came to pick up Barbara. Linda decided to take a walk around the evening city. The girl did not calculate her strength and soon realized that she was very tired. Shopping around the boutiques made her very tired. The tortured heroine sat down on a bench and took off her new shoes, which had rubbed her feet. She had no strength to walk at all. Suddenly, next to Linda, who was resting on a bench, was the same Alex, whom her friends had recently remembered, offering Linda a chocolate bar to refresh herself, and moved on. The girl did not at all expect to meet anyone at such a time, much less to receive a piece of energy. She jumped up and ran to catch up with the sudden savior to thank her. Linda invited her classmate to go to the bar for a cup of coffee. Alex did not resist for long, and he himself brought his new acquaintance to the coffee shop, ordering her a mountain of sweets. The young man sat down opposite and studied the girl. He tried to understand who she was and why she behaved so impudently at school. Classmates sat at the table and looked at each other. Alex was the first to break the silence, asking what kind of relationship the girl had with the blonde guy he saw in the ward. Linda was indignant that they were just classmates, and the sight of each other on the floor had a completely different meaning, rather than a friendly hug, after which the young man offered to walk the girl home so that she would not get lost. Help was really needed, since the new shoes failed the heroine again, and if it weren't for Alex's strong hand, she would have fallen, twisting her ankle. Clutching onto her savior, Linda limped down the street. Thoughts of taking off the damned new thing and going barefoot did not leave the girl, but she steadfastly continued to walk. The girl was saved by her partner, who was passing by and looking for her friend at a late hour. Linda happily got into the car, leaving Alex completely confused. The young man smoked thoughtfully, remembering today's meeting with a new classmate, but his thoughts were interrupted by the bodyguards who appeared, sending the guy home. The next day, Lucas appeared at school, having been discharged from the hospital, and now he was full of revenge, taking out his rage on the school children who came to hand. Both younger students and former friends suffered from the fists of the evil bully. He mercilessly tyrannized everyone. Only Roy was able to calm the bully down a little after seeing another beating of a junior student. At recess, Alex handed Linda's blonde classmate a bag of her clothes and asked him to give them to the owner. The handsome man was at a loss, quickly found his girlfriends chatting peacefully in the classroom, and curiously asked how and why the new student's school uniform ended up in the young man's possession. Barbara saved the girl by showing a photo of their shopping trip and explaining that the package was simply forgotten by Linda in the evening when she returned home and had a chance meeting with Alex. Then the blonde suggested that someday all three of them should get together at her house to have fun and have a snack. The day was not easy, and the main character, tired of new acquaintances and school activities, after school arrived at the apartment that she and her friend had temporarily rented to implement their plans for revenge. The premises looked more like a huge warehouse, but the price and safe location suited both of them. After exchanging information about how the day went, the partners opened the flash drive brought by the girl from Roy's house. What they saw greatly surprised the friends. They did not expect that there would be only one file, which contained a single photograph of a man of about 35 with a baby in his arms. It was night outside, but John could not sleep, wondering who this guy was who lived alone and for whom there was absolutely nothing, and whether this young man was some kind of cover. For Linda, the night was also restless. She was looking for the boss, but saw only the corpses of bodyguards and a sea of blood. The girl was completely at a loss. She tried repeatedly to call her boss, but the caller was unavailable, and horror gradually crept into her soul. The nightmare was interrupted by a sharp shout of rise, bursting into the brain of the main character. John, who had been trying to wake up his partner for several minutes, did not have time to jump back and was sent into the corner of the room with a blow of his fist. It was necessary to begin analyzing the information already available, and Linda began to wonder which of the 34 school children was the son of their enemy. Logically, there were only 4 top-ranking candidates left. One had to be identified. The first on the list was Alex. Yes, the same Alex who helped the girl with Lucas, handed her a chocolate bar and saved her from falling. Second place went to a bully and a troublemaker who offended Barbara, and thanks to Linda, ended up in a hospital bed. The girl reasoned and tried to understand what organizations and companies were connected with Mr. Brown. John, who was a worthless fighter, but a great computer scientist, listened silently and tried to find information in the database. Next on the selected list of heirs was Roy, who behaved according to the first rank, was not afraid of anyone, protected the weak, and helped his classmates. While the partners were analyzing the available data and were unaware of the threat hanging over the girl, Lucas had his own meeting, to which he invited a couple of killers. The young man showed the mercenaries a photo from the phone of his offender, sitting in class with his new friend, and warned them not to touch the blonde. Linda's face seemed familiar to the bandits, and they told the story of 20 years ago to their customer. In the morning in class, Roy and his new friend discussed the upcoming trip to Barbara. The blonde did not keep her waiting and invited new friends to her place after school. Excuses did not help, and classmates went to get ready for a visit. The girl had already called the driver so that everyone could get home together. Linda was delayed and stepped aside to warn John about the unexpected delay and asked not to bother her with calls. The main character was walking along the school corridor, catching up with her classmates, when Lucas appeared to meet her, as if he was specially watching for her alone. A push on the shoulder, and the girl's phone fell out of her hands onto the floor. The screen was broken, which greatly upset Linda. She was not going to remain silent and demanded money from the offender to repair the equipment. The bully, mockingly and ridiculingly, took out bills from his wallet and threw them to the girl. The girl took the given amount and silently walked past, trying to restrain herself and not attack the impudent man again. Roy, noticing that Linda had fallen behind, went to look for the girl at school, not having time to see the conflict that had occurred. The main character, on the way to Barbara, told the young man about the first clash with Lucas and the reason for it, clarifying that he was then taken to the hospital. The car journey turned out to be short, and the friends quickly reached the blonde's personal apartment, which seemed simply huge to Linda. Having settled comfortably in the hall, the hostess and her guests cheerfully began to choose what dishes they would order for lunch. Suddenly, Barbara's face changed dramatically. She shook and screamed. It turned out that her dad was calling. In 1 second, the girl pushed the resisting guests into the dressing room. Roy and Linda found themselves pressed against each other in a dark, narrow closet. Barbara spoke loudly to her dad, convincing him that she was at home alone and no one had come to see her. The father did not believe it and scolded his daughter that she was violating his orders not to bring boys into the house. Suddenly, the hanger in the closet fell, and the owner heard a crash on the phone. The girl had to show a video of the dressing room, where the noise allegedly came from, that there was no one in the house. The telephone conversation was interrupted, and the young people were happily able to leave the stuffy, dark place. The order arrived, and the excited, hungry friends began to eat with appetite. Linda ate for two. Pizza was her favorite dish, and Roy became sad and offered to take the guest girl home. Having had their fill, the girls lay down on the sofa and began to have fun, and the young man took upon himself the responsibility of clearing the table and taking the dishes to the dining room. Taking advantage of the guy's absence, the main character ran away so as not to go home with Roy. Linda was walking along the dark streets and suddenly noticed surveillance. A hooded man stood in a dark corner and was clearly waiting for someone. The girl passed by, but an unknown person attacked, and she realized that they were waiting for her, and he was not alone. The man put a knife to Linda's throat and advised her to silently do what she was told. The main character remembered the techniques that she was taught, thanks to which she managed to escape from the hands of the invader. The forces were unequal. There were several bandits. The girl was able to put the first stranger down. 3 more came to the aid of her friend. The fight was difficult, but Linda managed to neutralize the attackers. Seeing the unpredictable defeat of the small, fragile girl, one of the men took out a knife. The main character managed to dodge, but the blade still hit her shoulder. The wound was shallow, but blood flowed in a thin stream. Linda belted her arm and was ready to fight again. There were more and more attackers. The girl's fight with the adult bandits exhausted her, but the advantage gradually shifted to her side. Everything was decided by a sneaky blow to the head from behind with a bottle. The main character didn't even see the man attacking from behind. The girl lost consciousness and was carried to the car. Upset Roy, having learned that Linda had left without him, went to look for her. He was scared that the subscriber was out of range. On the way, in a dark alley, the young man saw a wounded man barely sitting on the ground. In the phone lying on the ground, there was a message where the girl had been taken. The pools of blood around indicated that the fight was serious. Linda woke up with a headache. She was in some abandoned factory warehouse. Her hands were tied behind her back. The saddest thing was that her personal enemy, Lucas, was sitting opposite her and grinning. The girl carefully examined the room and counted the mercenaries. The kidnapper sat on a chair surrounded by bandits and wondered out loud what he should do with his victim. Even in such a helpless position, Linda behaved defiantly and made threats, which completely infuriated the young man, and he attacked her. Having calmed down, the young man sat down again and continued to talk about the future fate of the girl, offering to give her to the attackers in order to avenge all his grievances. The main character silently listened to the enemy's monologue, pondering what to do next and gathering strength. Lucas went wild. He talked about how easy it is to find mercenaries and force them to fulfill any demands if you have money. Suddenly, the young man took out an old photograph from his pocket in which a beautiful girl was sitting at a table surrounded by adult men of gangster appearance. Her face was very familiar. The young man suggested that this was Linda's mother and what she could be doing in this strange company. The kidnapper described in all colors what could have happened at that time, but the young lady did not succumb to provocations. Lucas could not stand it. In a rage, he jumped up to this calm, strange girl and swung his hand to hit her. The close distance helped the main character kick the offender. This was her signature move, which she mastered to perfection. The young man flew to the side and with great difficulty was able to get up. In anger, the kidnapper grabbed a bat and began beating the girl, regretting that they had only tied her hands earlier. Only in the evening, John read a message from a friend that she was visiting and asked not to disturb her. The time was already very late, and the partner began to worry why there had been no news from the girl for so long. The navigation showed that Linda's phone was located far outside the city, which greatly surprised the young man. Suddenly, the connection was lost, and the location data disappeared. The partner was completely bewildered, not understanding what could have happened. The loss of connection was explained by the fact that the bandits decided to get rid of unnecessary evidence and threw the phone into the river behind the warehouse. Tired of the beating, Lucas began to realize that he could have killed the hostage and was very scared. The bat was covered in blood. Linda sat in a pool of blood and showed no signs of life. One of the men came up to see if the girl was breathing. Suddenly, the eyes of the main character opened and she grabbed the mercenary's throat. The fight was so fast and sudden that within seconds the bandit was dead. The girl was able to get up. There was so much hatred in her eyes that the attackers got scared and ran away. Covered in blood, Linda approached Lucas on wounded legs. The young man was numb. He could not move from fear and surprise. The bandits rushed to the aid of their master. The girl fought with all her strength, realizing that the outcome of the fight depended only on her. The mercenaries fell one by one, but the young lady's strength was already running out. While the bandits were fighting with the girl, the young man was looking for a way out. Lucas was very scared and didn't know what to do. He understood that Linda would soon get to him. No one would be able to stop her. And the young man dialed the police. The gang leader was on the sidelines all the time. No one saw him. He approached his owner and asked for an increase in the payment, taking into account the current situation, promising to deal with the girl. Finally, Linda dealt with everyone and went to look for the main culprit of the kidnapping. She found Lucas crawling on his knees towards the exit, who only whimpered and tried to open the gate. The moment of reckoning came. The bloodied girl stood over the lying young man, begging for mercy. Suddenly, a leader jumped out of the darkness, whose existence the girl did not suspect. Earlier, she had counted only 5 attackers, and they were all already wounded or killed. He turned out to be the 6th and stabbed her in the stomach. Having thrown the bleeding victim to the ground, the man tried to finish her off. A chain lying nearby saved the situation. The girl managed to tighten it around the killer's neck. The last attacker was dead. The main character tried to get up and stop the bleeding. Her strength was leaving her. Lucas could not move from horror. He sat silently at the gate and watched what was happening. He could not believe how this all beaten and wounded, fragile little girl dealt with an entire gang and remained alive. Linda took the bat and headed towards the kidnapper. He had no chance. The young man cried, screamed, begged for mercy, and promised any money from his father. The girl decided to take advantage of the situation and began asking about the companies and their connection with Mr. Brown, whom everyone called the chairman. The main character tried to find out who the son of her worst enemy is. The police detachment that arrived at the scene of the fight did not allow the interrogation to be completed. Roy's head could be seen behind the police officers. Rescuers arrived at the scene of the incident together with the police and examined the victim. The girl lost a lot of blood and was already unconscious when John ran into the warehouse. Seeing the body of her friend, he decided that her partner was dead. While rescuers carried Linda's body into the car, her friend, who introduced himself as her relative, and a classmate met. The Secret Service officers took Lucas under arrest. He desperately resisted, denied that he had kidnapped the girl, and blamed everything on her. There was silence in the abandoned factory, and only 2 people quietly discussed what had happened. Linda was taken on a stretcher to the rescue vehicle to be transported to the hospital. She had lost a lot of blood, but was still alive. John ran after the car when Roy handed him the phone, thinking it belonged to the girl. The newly announced relative was surprised. He knew exactly where her friend's gadget was and why it was inaccessible, but he took the smartphone, thinking that there could be any necessary information there. Linda lay unconscious in the ward for several days. Her head was completely foggy. The girl rushed about, strangling her worst enemy, who for some reason did not die, and threatened her, saying that he could not be defeated and others would come in his place. The fog cleared and the main character opened her eyes. Barbara and an old friend John were sitting in the room. The friend's delight knew no bounds when she saw her classmate wake up, and her partner was no less happy. While Linda lay unconscious, her friend introduced himself as a relative and made up a story about an accident in which she allegedly had been involved. The conversation quickly tired the wounded woman. She wanted to be alone, but her friend chatted non-stop, admiring her new acquaintance, who told her that he had given up everything to save and care for a sick relative. When they managed to send Barbara home and the friends were left alone, John briefly told Linda what had happened, and they drew up a further plan of action. The partner handed over a phone found in the warehouse, the owner of which turned out to be Lucas. One of the messages shocked the girl. It informed the kidnapper that Alex did not object to his showdown with his classmate. The main character could not believe that a handsome, strong guy from the next class, who had helped her more than once, could be involved in the kidnapping. Before leaving the room, the friend laughed that now they both had the same wounds on their bodies. At this time, Alex was calmly sitting on a bench not far from the school and smoking, communicating with someone on his gadget. Roy appeared unexpectedly and immediately attacked his old acquaintance with questions about the new student and what the connection was between them. The blonde warned that it was better to stay with friends and not get in his way, which surprised his classmate, who did not even understand the essence of the conversation. In the hospital, Linda almost immediately regained consciousness and tried to move on her own, trying not to disturb anyone, but every movement was difficult. The girl began to regain her lost athletic form by doing exercises in her hospital bed, but the medical staff categorically forbade the exercise, and the doctor even threatened to perform an operation without anesthesia. The frightened main character escaped from the hospital and decided to hide in the first aid post of her educational institution in order to lie down and heal for a while. The girl was prevented from getting to school calmly by a junior high school student named Alan, who miraculously learned about the tragedy that had happened and the detention of Lucas, who was constantly beating the boy, and now considered her his mistress. Only flight saved the heroine from the uninvited, intrusive servant. With great difficulty, Linda made it to the first aid station. The room was empty. The exhausted girl lay down on the bed and fell asleep. When the main character opened her eyes, Alex was sitting on her bed at the head of her bed. The young man went to the medical room for medicine, saw a classmate resting there, and decided to stay to guard her sleep. The girl said that she escaped from the hospital and was forced to stay here, accusing the young man of kidnapping her. Alex denied his guilt, but as compensation he offered help, which the new student took advantage of and asked to take her to his home. The young man was very surprised, but agreed. Sarah, the young man's housekeeper, was even more surprised when she saw a stranger in their apartment. The girl was given a separate room with a huge, soft bed. The weakness did not leave the main character. She was ready to lie there for a very long time, but she had to go and get information. In the next room, Linda saw the half-naked owner of the house and did not hesitate to enter. Her head began to spin, and the girl would have fallen if not for the support of her classmate again. Alex sat the guest down. She was all on fire. Apparently, the consequences of her injuries and wounds were making themselves felt, so her temperature rose. Suddenly, in the area of the guy's elbow, Linda saw multiple traces of intravenous injections and inquired about the reason. In response to the question, the owner of the house put the girl outside the door of his room. No temperature can stop the main character if she is invited to dinner, and the young people meet in the dining room. Sarah admired the young lady and her appetite, and predicted a long-term relationship for the modest couple. To distract the housekeeper, Alex reminded his classmate that the other day there would be a sports festival at school, and she would have to take part in one of the competitions, perhaps even shooting. The young man went away for a short time and returned with a pistol in his hand. In one movement, Linda grabbed the weapon, surprising the young man with her dexterity. Imagine the disappointment when the girl realized that it was a toy. The gun was not real, but it was a very interestingly made object. The shots were fired with rubber balls, one of which immediately hit the owner of the house. Sarah was the most happy about the conversation. She really wanted to watch the competition and said that such weapons were manufactured by the company of Alan's father, the same elementary school student who was ready to become Linda's servant. The girl was tired of everything that was happening and lay down at the dining table. The heroine almost fell asleep. Alex did not bother her and sat quietly next to her. For dessert, the housekeeper brought fruit. Linda immediately woke up and tried to cut off a piece of the apple, but suddenly a sharp pain appeared in her stomach, and the girl lost consciousness. The main character woke up on a bed in some unfamiliar room. Her classmate was sitting next to her. Remembering recent events and thinking that she had been kidnapped again, the girl attacked Alex. The young man did not resist and tried to calm the guest. The owner of the house explained that he was sick, and those marks on his hand were medical procedures, and this room was his own small hospital. The young people talked for a long time, trying to better understand each other and learn something new. The young man was very interested in the relationship between his guest and Roy. Alex said that he had a childhood friendship with Lucas, which is why they still communicate, and offered to take the girl to the hospital from where she left prematurely. But the main character remembered the doctor's threats and categorically refused to leave. Linda asked to stay overnight in this room so she could go to school in the morning. The girl was unable to find out anything about the chairman and his son, and this greatly upset her. The young man was tired and went to sleep on the next bed. Before going to bed, the owner of the house explained to a delighted classmate that there was no need to leave the room, and there were video cameras installed everywhere. Morning has come, which means a new school day. Frustrated, Barbara was late for school. She didn't want to sit in class at all. Seeing Roy ahead, the blonde ran after him, and on the way to class told him that their friend had escaped from the hospital. While classmates were discussing the situation, a luxurious black car overtook them and stopped at the gates of the educational institution. Linda got out of the car with her school backpack. Barbara rushed to hug her friend and ask questions, but then Alex appeared from the car, shocking his classmates with his appearance. To all the questions, the young man explained that he did not meet the girl on the way to school by chance, but they had been together since yesterday, which caused even more surprise. Throughout the lesson, Barbara called her classmate, trying to find out the details of what she heard, but Linda remained steadfastly silent. Roy also tried to find out the situation, to which he was sent with questions to his new acquaintance. Tormented by questions, the main character told her friend that they were just talking and nothing incriminating had happened. The girl saw Roy approaching and realized that new questions and explanations could not be avoided. When Alan ran up to the main character from the other side, her nervous system finally couldn't stand it, and the girl jumped out the window, leaving her perplexed friends standing in the middle of the school corridor. The glass was broken and Linda disappeared. Covered in splinters and cuts, the new student went into the infirmary for help and ran into Alex again. The young man offered to take the victim to the hospital, but just the memory of the medical workers made the girl almost lose consciousness. Together with the medic, the young man took out the fragments and treated the wounds, noting that during the jump, the ligaments in the ankle joint were damaged and rest was needed. The girl happily lay down on the bed in the room and fell asleep. Late at night, Lucas woke up from the large black shadow of a stranger in glasses standing in the room near the bed. There were no guards nearby. The young man was very scared, thinking that this was revenge and they had come to kill him. But the terrible ghost just asked for all the information about Linda and disappeared. The next day, there was a knock on Roy's door. The young man opened it and saw his new classmate standing modestly in the hall. The young people started talking, and the guy gave the girl a gift with which Alan had run to her the day before. The box contained a toy gun made at the boy's father's factory. Linda and Roy spent a long time sorting things out and asking each other questions. The blonde took out the same photograph with a young stranger, very similar to her classmate, in the company of bandits, which the girl had already seen in the hands of her kidnapper. The young man refused to answer the question of where he got it from or give up the photo. The classmates continued talking about each other. Linda did not see condemnation or hatred in the eyes of her new friend. They shone with warmth and some new feeling. The girl could not leave. They again and again found new topics for communication. The main character saw a scar on Roy's hand from a gunshot wound, and the young man explained that he also had a main enemy. The young man said about the man in the photo from his computer that he was a very close person and died many years ago. The conversation lasted a long time. It helped both of them become closer to each other and trust. The day of the school competition has arrived. Linda went to school without enthusiasm. She absolutely did not want to take part in competitions. In the courtyard of the educational institution, dressed-up participants were already standing and greeting guests. In the school corridor, the girl encountered a stranger in glasses, who in surprise dropped documents and business cards of some company. Linda only managed to remember that the head of the company was Mr. Smith, and the company was a construction company. The young lady could not pass by, helped collect the papers, and asked what the unfamiliar man was doing at school, to which he replied that he had come to the competition to support a relative. Linda offered to help get the man to class, questioning him along the way and clarifying that he was the head of the construction company. Something confused the girl. She didn't really believe in her relative and decided to watch the stranger. The plans were interrupted by Barbara in a bunny costume, who grabbed her friend and took her to class to change clothes. The indignant Linda got the crow costume. Roy stood nearby in an orange tiger outfit. The school principal announced the start of the sports festival, and the competition began. It was fun and noisy. Balloons flew into the air. Suddenly, the main character froze in surprise. Standing in front with his back to the girl was her kidnapper in a cat costume, who had also come to the school event. Linda approached Lucas and asked why he was released. The frightened guy rushed to run away from his victim in horror, pushing everyone along the way. The young man shouted that the girl was a murderer, but the school children looked at the enraged student in bewilderment, seeing that his suit had become wet from below, and there was an unpleasant smell of fresh urine. Before the main character had time to move away from the meeting with the enemy, a support group suddenly appeared in the person of her imaginary relatives, John and Alex. The partner disguised himself and actively portrayed a loving relative. Roy found Linda on the set and offered her a souvenir photo. Alex supported the photo idea. As a result, instead of 2 people, there were all 5 people in the picture, including his partner. The competition began with a traditional tug-of-war. The forces were approximately equal. Linda pulled with all her might. To give the victory to the girls, on the opposite side, Roy let go of the rope and everyone fell to the ground. Thus, the team of the new student won the match. The whole class rejoiced at the victory. The boys went off to play football. Alex and Roy ended up on opposite teams. The fight for the ball was tough. No one wanted to lose. Her classmates cheered loudly in the stands. Only the upset Linda could not decide which team to support. Alex was on a roll. The handsome guy caught the ball and sent it into the opponent's goal with a confident movement. It was a clear goal. The ball was in the goal net, and this decided the outcome of the match. Another victory, which has already become a tradition, was again won by the team of high school students. Barbara in the stands couldn't stop screaming with delight, but judging by Linda's sad look, she didn't share that joy. The losing players scattered across the field. The blonde man sat with the girls on the site and drank cold water. It was very hot. The first-year students who participated in the competition staged a real celebration, selling ice cream, which was especially valuable in such weather. Junior school children offered to break the record for eating a crispy stick. The prize was free elite ice cream. Linda agreed to the game immediately. It was more difficult to find a playing partner, as classmates began to refuse and offered to simply buy portions. Roy continued to resist, but the girl really wanted to win. When the young man was ready, the girlfriend left to look for a partner. Unsuspecting Alex sat on the bench and rested after a difficult match. Linda's offer to take part in an extraordinary competition together attracted the young man's interest. The couple sat on chairs in the middle of the school alley and prepared for the spectacle. The task was that without touching each other, the players should take turns biting off a crispy stick, leaving the tip as short as possible. The crowd watched with excitement what was happening. Only Roy stood gloomy. He also wanted to participate with his new acquaintance in such an intimate game. Alex moved closer to the girl and advised her to listen only to him. The competition began. Gradually, the stick became smaller and the lips closer to each other. There was a very small piece left, and Linda realized that she was not yet ready for such intimacy. John and Barbara were cheering for their friends. The partners took turns biting off piece by piece, moving closer and closer to each other. Linda couldn't stand it and stopped the game. The record remained the same, which somewhat upset Alex, who was hoping for victory. The consolation prize was a huge portion of ice cream in crispy waffle cups. Unexpectedly for everyone and the weather forecast, it began to rain, and the school children scattered to their classes. John noticed that at the first drops, Roy became nervous and quickly left for school. The main character, suspecting something was wrong, went to look for an acquaintance and found him in a sports equipment warehouse. The young man was really upset, but did not want to tell the reason. Linda was persistent and asked why there was such hostility between rain and water, and whether there was something secret hidden behind it. Roy denied all guesses and assumptions, which upset the girl. Even in the morning, getting ready for a school competition, the partners discussed Roy's identity, taking into account his insight, the lack of information in the database. John assumed that he could be an agent, just like them. Linda decided to check the assumption and began looking for a bug or other listening devices in the young man's clothes, which first confused and then amused the guy. As always, Alex entered the warehouse at the most interesting place. The girl was embarrassed and began to make excuses. The young man noticed that the couple was constantly doing something strange anywhere. The dark-haired youth sought out Linda for the final event, bringing an umbrella for the rain. The athletes went to prepare for the final competition, which was to take place in the maze of the sports field in the near future. No one noticed a junior high school girl in the back of the warehouse holding a gun to her face with tears in her eyes. Her name was Khloe, and she had a very hard day today. Alan's gift came in handy, and Linda and Alex, who suddenly announced his participation in the shooting, began to prepare weapons. The same girl from the warehouse stumbled into the athlete's locker room with pistols, falling to her knees. A classmate lifted her thin body and burst out laughing at the sight of such a rival. The main character inquired about the composition of the teams, but the guy explained that these were individual competitions, and victory would go to one player. In order not to harm the spectators and ensure the objectivity of the competition, a quadcopter was launched, thereby notifying the start of shooting. Now Linda and Alex turned out to be opponents with pistols that shoot rubber balls in their hands. Suddenly, the young man pulled out a weapon and shot at an opponent who appeared from around the corner, thereby saving the girl's gaming life. The student was eliminated from the game after being lightly hit by a rubber ball. Linda suggested sticking together until the end of the game to win. The friends inspected the area and prepared for battle. The scoreboard displayed information about the remaining participants, which made the game easier. While at the top, Linda almost received a bullet, that is, a ball, and quickly jumped off the box. Alex barely managed to catch the girl. It was necessary to look for enemies, and the partners carefully moved through the labyrinth. The rest of the students watched the broadcast of the shooting and the actions of the players on TV, and the quadcopter recorded live. Barbara watched with satisfaction as a couple of her classmates overcame obstacles together. Roy didn't like this movie at all. He was jealous of his friend and also wanted to be close to Linda. Suddenly, the broadcast stopped. Viewers could not understand the reason, because the most interesting was yet to come. The shooting participants saw the fallen aircraft and were confused, since it was now impossible to count the players and determine the winner. Suddenly, the main character heard a shot from a real pistol and quickly looked around. Alex felt a blow to his shoulder, and something sticky flowed down his body. No one saw where the bullet came from. Khloe, with tears in her eyes and shaking hands, stood behind the seniors and re-aimed at the guy when a hand grabbed her. Linda identified the shooter and managed to prevent the next shot. A frightened schoolgirl lay on the floor with a pistol to her temple, and the main character stood on top and tried in vain to find out who ordered the murder. The shooter was silent and only sobbed, leaving the girl with the assumption that the stranger with glasses was the cause of the tragedy. In Linda's memories, an image arose of a loved one whose family was taken hostage by the syndicate, and on its orders he killed people, including children, with a knife, then committed suicide. They tried to stop the man, but he was insane from grief. Neither John nor she herself could detain the killer. He was strong and excited. The massacre could not be stopped. Several people died. The man cut the blood vessels in his neck. While dying, he asked for forgiveness for what he had done and wanted to die. His gaze and tears remained forever in the girl's soul. Khloe had the same words now. She refused to speak and asked to kill her. Linda returned to the bleeding Alex and tried to help him. Soon the howl of sirens was heard. The police and rescuers arrived at the same time, and the friend was quickly transferred into the reliable hands of doctors. The policeman was shocked to see a military magazine with ammunition in the toy pistol. In the evening, Linda and her partner discussed the shooting, trying to figure out who was shot and who needed it. Colleagues went through a bunch of options and settled on the fact that it was no coincidence that the man with glasses arrived at the school for the competition. The girl managed to remember the name and phone number on the business card that fell to the floor during their unexpected collision. The agents decided to try calling. The subscriber answered immediately, Mr. Smith, and it really was him. Guessed from the silence on the phone that the call was from the same student who came across him at school and showed him to the hall. He even knew her name. It was not for nothing that he scared Lucas so much at night. Learning about it has all the information. The conversation did take place. Linda tried to find out what kind of person he was and what the purpose of his visit to school was. Mr. Smith felt completely safe, surrounded by bodyguards. He mentioned the boss's full name and was surprised that 3 agents were still alive, including the girl. Suddenly, on the phone, the main character heard the screams of Khloe and some man who asked not to touch the child. The head of the company continued to talk with the girl as if nothing was happening. The girl screamed again. She asked not to kill her father. A plan of action had matured in Linda's head. She just needed to determine the location of the enemy. While the girl was stalling for time, John tried to determine where the conversation was coming from. Fearing that they would be figured out themselves, the young man turned off the connection. Smith's coordinates were in the hands of the main character, and she was ready to act. But then the partner became indignant. He was very scared for his friend, knowing whose lair she would go to. It was not possible to dissuade the girl, so instead of a bulletproof vest, a friend wrapped Linda in books and secured her with tape as protection. The slightly clumsy and overweight main character reached a large warehouse, which was located at the calculated coordinates. The guards stood at the entrance and did not suspect anything. The first post was completed successfully. The girl moved on. Inside the warehouse, Linda came across another bodyguard standing at a door. The struggle did not last long. Behind the door was a frightened Khloe, very surprised by the arrival of a student from her school. Another guard was neutralized, and the girl was released. Linda stood over the body of the watchman and asked the child about what had happened, having assumed in advance that her father was in the hands of the bandits. The guess was confirmed, but the child categorically refused to go anywhere. He was simply afraid of the bandits. Linda abandoned her persuasion and went to help out the head of the family, Khloe. Finally, the girl made up her mind and they set off together. The security didn't have to wait long. This time the man turned out to be stronger and more active, and the fight dragged on. The positions changed very quickly, and finally the bodyguard managed to knock the girl down. With her classic move, Linda managed to neutralize the fighter and escape from his hands. The main character managed to crawl away, but the guard caught up with her again. The man managed to take off his mask and saw that he was fighting with the girl. The bodyguard was already relaxed and celebrating an easy victory, but he did not take into account the character and experience of his victim. The knife entered the fighter's throat, taking away all chances of life. In the next room was Khloe's father with his hands tied. While Linda was fighting the guards, one of the surviving men grabbed the schoolgirl and began to blackmail the unexpected guests. The fighter put a knife to the child's throat, threatening to kill him. The main character heard the girl's screams and rushed to help. At the guard's command, Linda put the knife on the floor and raised her hands. The girl calculated the throw and rushed towards the enemy like an arrow. A man with a pistol suddenly appeared and disrupted the main character's plans. Next came Mr. Smith. Linda froze in anticipation, ready to attack at any second. The head of the company spoke first. The bodyguard with a pistol in his hand did not take his eyes off the girl. Smith fulfilled the defender's promise and gave Khloe the key to her father's handcuffs, warning the family to quickly leave the facility. 3 people remained in the room, and the head of the company invited Linda to have a frank conversation. Smith suggested that the girls solve their common problem, that is, find the chairman's son and kill him, since the young man, in the event of his father's death, becomes the head of the syndicate, which is extremely unprofitable for the management of the construction company. The man hinted that if Linda decided to deceive him, he had a photo of his friends from the sports festival, which he would definitely use. The main character was forced to agree with her enemy's proposal. After negotiations, the girl successfully reached home. The door was opened by John, armed with a bat and wearing a bicycle helmet, preparing for the arrival of uninvited guests. Seeing a bunch of missed calls from Alex on her phone, the girl dialed his number. The young man felt much better and allowed his classmate to visit him. At the entrance to the young man's mansion, there was a guard who, after communicating with the owner, escorted the schoolgirl to the ward. The guy was sitting on a hospital bed and talking to the doctor. The girl was glad to meet and that everything ended relatively well. The main thing is that Alex is alive. The young man was also glad to see his new acquaintance. He was very drawn to this strange classmate, who constantly gets into some kind of trouble. The security guard left the youth alone and retired to his workplace. The guy's right arm was bandaged and put in a splint. He himself looked good. The main character stood modestly near the bed and did not know how to start a conversation. The young man was very concerned about the girl's safety, but did not want to answer questions. Linda said she was leaving school. She didn't want to put her friends in danger, and she believed she was shot. Alex said that now the school will strengthen security measures, introduce additional security, and conduct inspections. The wounded friend invited the girl to live with him for the sake of her own protection and to continue her studies at school, while the purpose of this offer was unclear. It was caring for Linda, or a means to keep her more closely under control. Roy unexpectedly came to visit his classmate, having agreed to visit the day before. The young man saw that his classmates were hugging and was upset. He went to visit the victim and did not at all expect to meet his new friend here. Roy offered the girl to take her home. The main character said that she would have to resolve a number of issues, and the young man prepared to leave, expressing words of joy at the recovery of his old acquaintance. But Alex accused his friend that it was he who persuaded Khloe to shoot, since he had gone to the warehouse earlier and had the opportunity to negotiate. Linda interrupted the boys' argument, telling them who caused the shooting. The girl spoke about the situation with the schoolgirl's father and why the girl agreed to the crime. Roy left. Tired, Alex went to rest, and Linda, thinking that being with the owner of the house would be able to learn more information and collect information daily, accepted the offer to stay in the house under reliable guard. The bodyguard showed the girl her room and told her where everything was. The spacious bedroom had a huge bed and everything you needed. The guard left, leaving the main character to comprehend the situation. Linda stood in the middle of the room and thought about how she could get rid of the bodyguards who practically never left her side. Left alone, the girl called her partner, warning that she would be staying with Alex for several days. John was glad that now his girlfriend would be safe. After finishing the call to her friend, Linda began to think of ways to get out from under the intrusive surveillance of the security guards. A plan was hatched. At the sound of breaking glass, the guards came running to see what had happened and whether help was needed. The table lamp was broken, but the girl was not injured. While the men were doing the damage, the main character ran away from the room. The next bodyguard was in the next room. He tried to detain the fugitive, but the girl was faster. Running into the hall and being surrounded, Linda easily jumped over the fence and jumped from the height of the second floor. The guards watched in bewilderment as the girl quickly disappeared from view. Breaking away from her pursuers, the main character walked through the rooms of the huge house, studying the situation, until she saw a small office with many bookshelves. The girl decided to study the literature that was most often used, looking at the amount of dust on the brochures. But a hand that appeared from behind changed her plans. Turning around, Linda saw the surprised owner of the house. He was not only surprised, but also annoyed as his bodyguards told about the antics of the new guest. The girl realized that something was about to happen and quickly began to come up with a motive for her action. Linda said that she was still in shock from the kidnapping and shooting. She was afraid of everything and behaved impulsively while pretending that she was suddenly dizzy and could not stand on her feet, and clung to Alex. The girl saw such a cunning move in an old romantic film. The guy should not have resisted such a trick because she was so weak and defenseless in front of him. They watched the movie a long time ago with John laughing and Linda trying to understand why it worked. But the move did not go through. Alex was still angry. It was necessary to urgently change the plan. The next tactical move with a tear was supposed to soften the situation, and tears flowed from the girl's eyes. Although to do this, she had to pinch herself on the healing wound. The owner of the house was confused. For the first time, he saw a strong and brave girl cry. The young man tried to calm the guest, but she was completely upset. Tears were rolling from her eyes. Alex was completely confused. He didn't know what to do in this situation. Linda asked to remain in the house, but to be moved to another room where there was no constant supervision. The classmate promised to correct the situation and listen to the guest's requests. Security moved the girl to another room, where it was more comfortable and a little more spacious. Having settled down on the bed, the main character once again replayed today's day in her head, which did not even reveal the secret of the house and its silent owner. The result of Linda's tears was the arrival of a psychologist who tried to get into her soul in order to help the girl. Linda did not expect such a turn of events. Her plans did not include communicating with anyone else. The girl refused the specialist's moral support and promised to call if she changed her mind. The psychologist insisted on talking and left her contact information, saying that Alex was very worried about her condition. The main character was surprised and asked to tell the owner of the house so that he could tell her this himself. Left alone, Linda began to make plans again. She was not at all happy with living under a hood and not leaving her room. An upset classmate asked the security guard several times what his guest was doing, but the answer did not please him. For several hours, the girl sat or lay on the bed without any movement. The young man wondered what happened to Linda and how else he could help her. For the first time, the young man was faced with a situation where he did not know what to do or what to do. Suddenly, the security guard reported that the guest was walking around the room and approached the window. The next view from the surveillance camera scared everyone. The observer reported that the girl was trying to climb out of the window and called the bodyguards. Alex was shocked and ran out of his room. A crowd of guards, led by the owner, ran towards the girl. The window was open and the room was empty. The young man was scared. The floor was high. There was no one below. In the room itself, behind the door, the culprit of the commotion stood quietly and looked at Alex. Linda asked her new acquaintance to listen to her and not be offended by the troubles caused. The hospitable host was shocked for the second time that day. He could not understand this girl. At first, his classmate seemed to him like an arrogant conceit who didn't notice anyone but herself. Then the young man encountered a fragile and helpless girl, capable of sadness and tears. At this time, the bodyguards were banging on the door, concerned about the safety of their owner. An enraged Linda reported that he was alive and unharmed. The girl returned to Alex and the conversation continued. The owner invited the classmate to return her home, but she unexpectedly refused. The girl persistently asked to be moved to the next room, preferably to the owner's room, to remove the observation post and to allow her to move freely around the house. Linda said she was still afraid of being attacked and was willing to live under the protection of a strong classmate. The puzzled guy promised to look for a separate room where there would be no total surveillance. Not really believing what was said, the girl calmed down. For several hours, the bodyguards, together with the main character, checked the newly allocated room for cameras and listening devices. Linda was pleased with the result. Despite the guests' resistance, daily conversations with the psychologist became a daily lunch ritual. There were also pleasant moments of staying at a classmate's house. Thanks to massage and various procedures, Linda fully recovered and returned to her usual athletic form. Most of all, the girl liked the mini pool right in the room. She could lie in the water for hours. Meals were taken at a certain time, and the dishes were very tasty and varied. So after relaxing in the water, the girl hurried to the dining room. In the big house, meetings with Alex were infrequent, which upset the guest. One day, a classmate came to see a girl. She was surprised, but was very happy to meet him. The young people talked abstractly. The young man was interested in how his new acquaintance had settled down and whether she liked everything. The girl was delighted, although she felt lonely in the big house. The owner offered to walk around the house and show all the floors. In one room, Linda saw a large, empty swimming pool and was upset that she couldn't use it. She loved to swim. The owner promised to fulfill the guest's request and fill the container with water. Alex invited the girl to spend time together and watch the video. The couple sat comfortably on the sofa. The film was romantic and very kind. Linda felt the young man's tension and really wanted to cuddle up to him. The girl tried to understand what he was thinking and why he invited her to his place. The young people started talking. Both of them had been oppressed by a feeling of loneliness since childhood. The main character felt how hard it was for Alex, that something was constantly bothering him, not allowing him to relax and rest. The girl wanted to understand the guy better and find out more information about him and his family. The guest's quiet, calm voice lulled the young man to sleep, and he lay down on her shoulder. Alex fell fast asleep. Linda realized that the owner of the house slept very little, was constantly nervous and excited, so she did not wake him up, making his head a little more comfortable on the sofa. The sleep was calm and quite sound. The young man did not feel the girl leaving and continued to sleep. The guest warned the bodyguard that the owner remained in the living room and went into the room. The security guard was very surprised. He knew that his boss suffered from insomnia and could not fall asleep for hours. The rested young man opened his eyes and realized that the film had ended and he was left alone in the room. The young man remembered the calm voice of his classmate, who looked at him and smiled. The girl occupied his thoughts more and more. She fascinated him, and he realized that he was carried away by her. In the morning, the young man went to the gym. It was time to recover from his injury. Linda found her classmate at one of the exercise machines. When she came to the next training session, she really liked this place and spent part of her time here. When Alex saw the guest, he suddenly let go of the heavy metal platform of the exercise machine. The girl managed to react and save her classmate from further injuries. The guard, afraid for the owner, was catching his breath. He would not have been able to help so quickly. The young man offered to restore the spent energy and have a snack, to which the guest happily agreed. Several days spent visiting did not bring Linda any closer to solving the mystery, and she still did not know whether Alex was the chairman's son or whether she needed to look for someone else. After a hearty lunch, the young people talked peacefully. The young man was also interested in the guest. He could not determine who she was and where she came from to his school. From lessons and neutral topics, the couple moved on to questions about life. Alex was very worried about the relationship between his new classmate and Roy. The owner of the house warned that their mutual acquaintance is not exactly the person he seems to be, so you need to be careful with him and not trust his beauty. Linda was glad. Finally, she received at least some information. The young man said that their blonde classmate had previously worked part-time in intimate establishments, loved to communicate with girls, and sometimes behaved incorrectly and even cruelly. Now the girl knew what Roy was like. The young people sat on the bed in the guest's room and tried to get each other to talk. A lot of questions accumulated. Alex never talked about his family. He was thoughtful and taciturn. Linda listened intently to every word, trying to learn more. The main thing that united them, as the main character understood, was the feeling of loneliness, carried through the years and not allowing them to live in peace. It was already late. It was time to go to bed, and the young man went to his room. Alex took a pack of cigarettes from his home clothes pocket and left the room. The indignant girl snatched the poison from the young man's hands, reading a lecture about poor health and the dangers of nicotine. The pack of cigarettes shattered into pieces and went into the trash container. Linda walked her classmate to his room, trying to calm him down to sleep. The young man categorically did not want to sleep. The guest laid her friend on the bed. She hoped that he would quickly fall asleep, and she would have a chance to look for something in his bedroom. The girl's plan did not work. The owner of the house did not close his eyes. Linda again began asking about the company of Alex's parents, his relationship with his classmates, and his life plans. The guy really liked the voice of his classmate. It made him happy and calmed him at the same time. No one spoke to him like that before going to bed. The girl admitted that as a child, she had a very close person, more than her mother, thanks to whom she felt happy, who constantly supported and helped her. The main character noticed that the young man stopped answering. His head was lying on the pillow and his eyes were closed. Alex finally fell asleep, which is what Linda wanted, and now we can start searching for information. The girl was afraid to move, not believing that her long efforts had been crowned with success. The owner of the house was snoring peacefully in his bed, probably dreaming of something good if he smiled a little in his sleep. The guest realized that she was also tired, but she had to work. It was night, and the phone call scared the girl. Oddly enough, it was handsome Roy who called. Linda was very surprised and clarified the reason for such a late conversation. She was already getting ready for bed. A classmate said that he simply missed her and was interested in the girl's condition after the events that had taken place. The young man recalled that after an extraordinary week-long break, school starts in the morning, and he hopes to see Linda in class. The girl decided to continue her studies, since the main goal of her introduction into the educational institution had not yet been fulfilled. The main character made a plan of events for tomorrow and went to bed. A call from a new acquaintance cheered up her thoughts. In the morning, arrested Alex was waiting for his guest in the dining room. A classmate left the room in a school uniform with a backpack on her shoulder. It was clear that she was getting ready for class. The young man had not yet fully recovered and planned to start attending classes in a week. It was hot outside, but Linda had only a warm uniform, and she had no choice but to wear a jacket to class. Alex, having learned that the girl had no other clothes, brought a summer version of the school uniform. The guest was very happy and clarified who this beauty was prepared for. The owner of the house mentioned his older sister, sighing sadly. The girl did not have time to ask more questions. Looking at his watch, the young man hurried his classmate. Time flew by very quickly. The girl, delighted with the gift, realized that she was already late and might not make it in time for the start of the lesson. Linda ran out of the room, grabbing new clothes so she could change at school. Alex regretted that he couldn't go to class with her. He already missed being in class too. The beauty in her new summer uniform proudly entered the classroom. Barbara was the first to see the girl and was very happy. At recess, the classmates met. The blonde was cheerful and talkative, but Linda had already decided to break off the relationship. The reason for this was a conversation with Smith, who hinted at her friends if something went wrong in their common plan for revenge. Barbara did not understand the changes in her new friend and tried to sort things out. The main character was adamant and stubbornly insisted on breaking up. Linda knew that if she failed, all her friends and close acquaintances would be defenseless and could suffer. The blonde didn't understand why everything had changed and became even more upset, tears dripping from her eyes. Distressed, Barbara ran out of the class, leaving her classmate alone. The main character went to another building, not noticing that a couple of elementary school students were looking at her and arguing about who her friends were and which of the boys she was dating. One claimed that she was with Alex. The other insisted that she had seen a girl with a handsome blonde boy. Roy suddenly came up from behind and tightly hugged Linda, who had managed to get scared. Turning around, the girl almost knocked her classmate off his feet. The schoolgirl who won the argument happily clapped her hands. Seeing that his new acquaintance was upset about something, the young man tried to find out the reason. Linda spoke about a difficult conversation and breakup with a blonde woman, whom she brought to tears. Sitting down on a bench in the school alley, the young people continued the topic. While Roy believed that the girl was wrong and everything could be corrected, Linda was silent. The guy insisted on an immediate search for Barbara. The girl doubted the correctness of the decision, but in her heart she was also very worried about the morning quarrel. The young man studied Linda's face. He definitely liked her, but something confused Roy, and he realized what it was, because his new classmate emanated a subtle aroma of something familiar. It was the smell of Alex. The young man asked what the relationship was between the girl and his old acquaintance, and Linda remembered the photograph with the bandits and the story of her hospitable savior about the blonde's past antics, not understanding what the young man was getting at and what he might think about her. Roy looked with his big eyes at his classmate sitting next to him and dreamed about something. Suddenly, the guy grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her along. The main character was shocked. She didn't know what to think about this classmate's behavior. Everything was explained immediately, because at that moment, Roy simply saw Barbara in the distance and began to act. He sincerely wanted to reconcile the girls. Puzzled, Linda went to catch up with her ex-friend. The girl was followed by instructions to ask for forgiveness and quickly make peace. The meeting between her classmates was not easy. The main character apologized for her behavior and words in class, but Barbara did not believe her ex-friend. The blonde believed that the new student was of a very high rank, and therefore did not want to communicate with her, and all her attempts to restore relations were just words. Roy, who caught up with the girls, also could not convince his classmate to believe Linda and forgive her. The blonde girl, completely upset, lowered her head and went home. She no longer believed in friendship. The main character was also upset because she was the culprit of her classmates' sadness. The girl walked along the school alley and recalled how interesting her friends were spending their time. Linda's memory recalled the only visit in her life and the cheerful laughter of her classmates playing around on the sofa after a delicious lunch. The main character walked home from school after classes and realized that she was right in some way in starting a breakup, but thoughts of a quarrel haunted her. Roy caught up with the girl again and offered to accompany her. Suddenly, Alex's security guard appeared at the gates of the educational institution, meeting Linda, who was given the task of bringing the guest to the house after classes. Linda was confused. She was not ready to go into the golden cage again. The main character asked the bodyguard to meet her later, but received a negative answer. The order was to deliver the girl safe and sound immediately after school. The solution to the problem was immediate. Linda grabbed Roy's hand and ran as fast as possible away from the car. The security guard rushed into the car and began pursuit. The girl pulled her uncomprehending classmate, not knowing what she was doing and why she acted so unexpectedly. In her head, there was only the thought of getting rid of the chase as soon as possible. A couple of young people were flying along the sidewalk like a bullet. A car was catching up with them, and no one could imagine what awaited them next.